Hello and welcome back to Pass the Torch, Legacies in Jewelry. My name is Naja de Savandiste. I have the honor of hosting this podcast and connecting with these incredible, wonderful people. And today we have Michael Robinson on as our guest. And I will admit that after this episode airs, I will likely have a degree of an existential crisis because the ethos and the intention behind this podcast was to interview the best of the best. And I fear that after this podcast episode airs, that I will have done that and I will have achieved that. And it's too early on in this project to have done that. So I'm going to have to do some thinking and some internal processing to figure out how I'm going to move forward. But truly, Michael, this was such a highlight of my career, to be honest. I am someone who is deeply impacted by Michael's work. I think, as consumers of art, we have different artists who speak to us. And the more that I sit at the bench and the more I understand what it takes to create to the caliber that Michael creates at, the deeper it impacts you. Without further ado, this is our conversation. Michael Robinson, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This is an absolute joy and a privilege to connect with you.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
You've talked about on your Instagram stories how you dislike the word master, but you are widely regarded as one of the best jewelers of our time. What initially drew you to jewelry?
Well, big question. It's very difficult actually for me. I've been asked this question before. It's very difficult for me to explain. I honestly don't know a time before jewelry. So if I rewind to when I was like a toddler, I'd obviously be playing with like Play-Doh and Legos and blocks and things like that. And before and after kindergarten, my dad was working in a retail jewelry store that had a workshop. And I think to get us out of our mums here, before and after kindergarten would be taken to work with my dad, who was in the store setting up the store really early. And to keep us out of the way would be put in the workshop. And so, like, we'd be playing with hammers and files and tools before kindergarten. And it kind of just never stopped. I think that's what got us into. Sorry, I keep saying us. I have an identical twin brother, so two of us took a very similar path. I need to start saying I. That's what took me into jewelry, just being around it from like the age of like 3, 4, 5.
So you grew up in a jewelry shop.
Pretty much, yeah. Pretty much in a jewelry workshop before and after kindergarten, and whenever would my dad, like most retail jewelers, was working all the time. So whenever we got to see my dad, he'd be either in the store or he'd be doing like valuations at home. So yeah, really kind of grew up around jewelry.
And for those who don't know you, I sense an accent. Do you mind telling us where you're from?
Yes, so I'm born and raised in New Zealand. So I'm a New Zealander. Before I came to America, there was like about an 8 year period of time where I lived and worked out of a workshop in Australia. There's a reasonable amount of press online that says that I'm Australian, but I'm actually a New Zealander. Born and lived in New Zealand for like 40 years.
But Australia is known for having a really amazing jewelry scene.
It is, yeah, it is. Actually, a couple of people have asked me like, why there's so many great jewelers in Australia. And I don't know why, because I only lived in Australia for 8 years and I didn't really talk to any Australians. But like in terms of I can relate it back to New Zealand, I think our isolation kind of helped because we didn't have like I remember when laser welders first came out, and for the longest while there was one laser welder in New Zealand, and they were just too expensive to like. I mean, they were expensive to begin with anyway, but the thought of like importing one and getting it all the way down to New Zealand was just way too much for most people. So like, and that was the same with like CAD design and 3D printers and things like that. Because of our isolation, we kind of just have to figure things out and do things the traditional way. So I kind of kept the traditional skills there longer rather than them being lost.
That's great. I had never thought of it that way. I've heard a lot of
Yeah.
people say that it helps when you don't train on a laser and that you just.
Yeah, I still use binding wire. I don't have a laser. I'm a binding wire and third hand tweezer kind of guy. Yeah, lasers. I mean, I'm not like CAD designs and 3D printing I'm kind of fundamentally opposed to. But I don't have a problem with laser welders. You're still doing it by hand, but it just feels a little too easy.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I was so excited to talk to you is because you really love hand fabrication.
I do. For me, I love the doing. I quite often say to people, for me, it's the journey that I enjoy, not the destination. So, like, for me, I love making something. I'm not going to take any shortcuts to make things go quicker or easier because to me, the journey of creation is the fun part. That's where I want to live and where I want to stay. Once I've got a finished piece of jewelry, then it's really not that interesting to me anymore. It'll get like 5 minutes of fame on Instagram and then it will be off with the collector and I'll never get to see it again. So, like, that's not that fun, really. It's the journey of creation that I love.
Oh, that's a great way to put that. Yeah, you really surpassed the public consensus of understanding of what a jeweler looks like, at least as far as I'm concerned that they're understood. I think that your vocation is multifaceted and you really are a Renaissance artisan because your talent is beyond just stone and metal. You approach the jewelry in so many different ways. You're a gouache artist and you have just a really unique fascination with taking the story of the piece all the way through yourself. You tend to reference this term called single author jewel.
Hmm.
I love that. Can you tell me where that came from?
Yeah, it's just a little saying that popped into my mind one day. I guess it came about from struggling because the term jeweler is such a broad stroke. Like somebody that's doing what I'm doing could be called a jeweler. Somebody that strings a couple of beads and a feather together could be called a jeweler. Somebody that's never made anything and works behind the counter in a retail store is called a jeweler. So, like, I guess I was just trying to come about of like a fun way that explains what it is I do and that I'm telling my whole story by myself, rather than I'm not contracting work out to stone setters or engravers or designers or makers. I'm doing everything. So for me, single author, I'm the only one telling and sharing my stories and the creations that I make. It kind of worked. I don't know. I don't know whether it does work for everybody, whether they interpret it the way I mean it, but to me, it makes sense.
Absolutely. Was there a defining moment in your career really think of as like a pivotal point for you?
There was one time, so when I was much, much younger, you start out and you don't really know any better. I'm kind of an introverted person. As I said, I don't speak to too many people, but I did have the understanding that like jewelers made things and then they sent it out to a stone setter to have the stone set. Stone setting was a completely different trade that you apprenticed for and learned, and that's all that they did all day was setting stones. And then there was engravers, and that's all that they did all day. It was like when you're building a house, there's plumbers and electricians and builders and painters. They're all separate trades. But one day, my dad's business partner at the time, who didn't really know bench work, for example, the jeweler that he normally used to make things couldn't do this one particular thing. And I think I was like 16 at the time. And I said, well, let me do it. And I just did it because I didn't know any better. And anyway, he said to me, like, you're good. How did he put it? He said, if you're good with your hands, you're good with your hands. Meaning, like, if you're good with your hands, like, why are you limiting yourself only to doing one part? And then I guess my mind filled in the rest of the explanation in terms of if I can draw a line on a piece of paper, I can cut a line in a piece of metal. If I can bend up a shank to make a band, I can bend that same metal as a prong over a stone. And I guess that one comment from the person that said, like, if you're good with your hands, you're good with your hands. I don't know whether I'm good with my hands, but I can do things with my hands. If I can do one thing with my hands, I can do anything with my hands. So I guess that was the defining moment where I started doing everything for myself and not being limited by what the normal thing is in the trade and just doing everything. I guess that's where something kind of clicked in my brain.
Yeah, you really truly have extraordinary workmanship. I see your pieces and every time it's just it hits my soul because there's something beyond just precision work. And I do see this a lot of times with some other jewelers. They're so precise and it's
Mm,
so excellent. But then there's a lack of flow
yeah.
sometimes and it doesn't necessarily speak to me personally. But your work is just so fun.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. What you're describing, so I moved to America a few years ago now, and that's the first time in my life where I've started talking to a few people that are in the trade. Otherwise, I try to stay very separate. But as I started talking to people, I realized I was getting frustrated by certain people because they were very fixated on the skills. Now, I think you need to learn the basic skills, but there also needs to be a point, and I explained it to this one person I was talking to. You might have actually heard it third hand, but like this one person was explaining to me the different courses that they do and the different skills they're focusing on and asking for like advice and more skills. And I wanted to grab the person and shake them and say, like, you need to realize all these skills that you're learning, which are valid skills, but like it's like learning how to print the alphabet. Like you've learned how to print the letter A, you've learned how to print the letter B, and you've learned how to print C, and you keep on learning all these different things. You've learned them. There's no point now going through and learning how to print like the Japanese alphabet or a different language. Like take these skills that you already have, turn them into words, and now tell a story with those words. Like your skills are only so much. You need to then put your own voice and tell a story with your skills and do something with them. So I tend to not focus, I've learnt how to do things. Now, how I do things isn't quite so important to me. It's why I'm doing them and what I'm trying to say with what I'm doing is of importance to me. And I hope that's maybe what you're picking up on. It's I'm expressing what's important to me and what makes me happy or puts a smile on my face in the hope that it captures an audience and puts a smile on their face too. But it's all about the why, not the how.
Yeah, yeah. How do you think you have evolved as an artist?
Just time. I'm old. I'm 47 now. So I think that just comes with time, and I think it's all about um, building confidence in your own skin, or at least for me, that's where the journey's gone. Is obviously in the beginning where you're just really hungry and you're trying to get the basic skills, and then you get to a point where like you have the skills and you're productive with them, and then you get to a point where it's like the world is full of jewelry. It really doesn't need another piece of jewelry. So, like, if I'm going to create anything, like, it's going to have to mean something and matter. And there's got to be a purpose to me as to why I'm putting something else out there into the environment that's like drowning in too much stuff anyway. Um, so yeah, it's just time. It's evolved with time and being confident in my own skin and finding out what feels right to me.
In that same vein, how would you describe your creative process?
Internal. Internal is my creative process. I'm a huge overthinker about everything in regular life, but also in terms of making things. I've had people ask me before, how do you know to make what you're making? Like if you're making everything one of a kind, you're making things that you've never made before, how do you know to do it? And the answer honestly is because I've made the piece extremely vividly, at least 10 times in my head before I come to make it. So by the time I'm coming to make it, I've done it so many times in my mind that it feels just very natural. I'm not having to think about anything. And it's the same when I sit down with a blank piece of paper, like my designs that I paint and draw. I don't need to do that before I've made them because it's very vivid there inside my head. I know exactly when I sit down in front of a blank piece of paper, I know exactly what's going to be on that page at the end of the day. because I can already see it in my head. I'm not exploring and trying to find a design, like it's there. So everything, sorry, to answer your question, everything's very internal for me. It's just in my head. And then if I decide to put it down on paper or if I decide to make it in metal, that's fine, but it's already like collected in my head anyway.
And when you're envisioning these pieces, is
Hmm.
this happening when you're lucid or when you're dreaming? Like, do you dream
No,
about
when
your
I'm
work?
no, I tend to have nightmares. They're not very pleasant dreams, the dreams I have. I only have nightmares. So like no, it's when I'm awake. It's when I don't sleep very well. I maybe get I mean I lay there with my eyes closed, but I maybe only sleep like 2 or 3 hours a night each night. So I'm constantly thinking then. And just when I'm walking around, when I'm making something, like I said, I when I'm making something, it doesn't involve a lot of brain power, I guess. So like I'm thinking about what I want to make next then. That's sounding weird as I'm explaining it, but like I'm just constantly thinking. It doesn't stop, it doesn't turn off.
You're a natural ponderer.
I guess so. Somebody I was speaking to who I hugely admire, actually the wife of a an artist I very much admire who passed away sadly. Her words mean a lot to me, and I have quite detailed conversations with her. And she said something once which made me feel really good and was just really beautiful. But she said, like, I can see what you do, and now I'm going to forget the word. Oh, I can see what you do is your calling. It's not a career, it's your calling. And I'm like, that just makes everything make sense to me. Like, yeah, it's just what I do. It was what I was meant to do, and it just made everything make sense to me. That was only just very recently. Um, yeah, it was really nice.
It's your vocation.
Yes, I'd have to Google that word to figure out exactly what it means, but
Okay,
I
I'm gonna
trust you.
I'm gonna come out with a whole series later on about the value of vocation. That's to come. But no, I think that that's so true. When you found you were almost early on exposed to it, but very often, artists can feel like nomads coming into discovery, and
Hmm.
eventually hitting something that they love. But I think what's really beautiful about your story is you had the opportunity right away and you just got started immediately.
Yeah. I mean, I remember when I was really young, my dad was renovating our house. We were in an old house. And so, like, there would always be lumps and blocks of wood around and offcuts of this and that. And I remember, like, making model boats out of the blocks of wood and making, like, toy cars out of the blocks of wood. And, like, just always, I sucked at schoolwork. I dropped out of high school. It didn't matter which class I was in. I was always drawing in my notebooks. I failed English. Like I'm an English speaking person and I failed English in high school. So like, but it wasn't because I couldn't do it. Actually, interestingly enough, one year in science class, we had a really great teacher that wanted our notebooks to look good. And it was all about like drawing graphs and making the things. And I got top in my class for science that year. So it was just like regular book smart schoolwork. It just didn't interest me at all. I just like drawing and making things. So it just felt very natural. I was always just making and doing things, not even jewelry related. I love making all sorts of different things. I just love creating things.
Yeah, I've observed you to be a Renaissance man. You have multiple avenues for your creativity.
Yeah, I guess it comes back to the like if you like I'm a visual thinker and I like doing and making things. So why limit yourself to just one thing? Again, carving wood isn't that different to carving metal, and carving stone isn't that different to carving anything else. It's just I think we tend to limit ourselves and put ourselves in little boxes because everybody else is quite happy in their little box. But like you don't have to stay in that box. You can do whatever you want if you just set your mind to it and care about it enough.
I love that. I feel a little bit about that way for me personally. There's this theory that jewelers really have to be rough around the edges. And I
Yeah,
and I like having a bit of a more refined presence, and
yeah.
Brady and I talk about that. It's like, well, we like to dress up when we come to the shop.
Yeah. It's so funny, isn't it? I meet people and they, because I mean, recently I put a little bit of myself on out there and social media and stuff like that, but for ages there wasn't any pictures of myself online. And when people met me for the first time, they'd be like, I was expecting like an overweight, grey-haired guy with like a beard down to here sort of thing. No offense to all the jewelers that look like that, but they were like expecting for me to like look a certain way because I'm a jeweler. So yeah, you can look nice. I mean, I'm not so much into fashion, but I do love sneakers and I do like dressing up when the occasion comes. So yeah, it is just weird the preconceived way that people think it should be. And I guess society is like that in general. But yeah, I'm a big one for pushing boundaries.
I love it. I love it. What is your greatest joy when it comes to taking a piece through the creative process from start to finish?
And the joy really is in the daily act of doing. So like every step of the way, I just love I love every step of the process. I love drawing. I love cutting azures in the back of like holes and things like that. I think that's a real challenge because I cut mine with a saw blade. So like I'm cutting I normally don't do plain squares or little hexagons or anything like that. I like doing different things, but I'm cutting this elaborate pattern and you can't see what's happening with the saw on the underneath as you're cutting. You just kind of have to trust that you're holding it at the correct angle and not opening up the other side of the hole. And it's I guess I love the difficult parts. Um, is what I love.
That's what's really great about jewelry is you can have a 30-year career the way that you have and still be learning every day
Oh, for
and
sure.
developing.
Yeah. No, 100%. Everything I make is one of a kind, so I'm doing something I haven't done before every single day. It's that finding a new path to walk each day. It keeps things interesting. But it's the doing. It's a doing I love.
Can you tell me a little bit about some of your bigger projects? I know you've had a few things go to some auction houses and museums and stuff like that. What was it like working on that caliber?
I know what you want me to say. Honestly, it's just like the honest answer is just it's no different. I put the same amount of care and attention I do into every single thing I do, whether it's repairing an old piece of furniture or making a piece of jewelry or doing a drawing. That brings me such great joy. The fact that a piece might sell through a big famous auction house, like it's kind of neat, but it's not that it's not what makes me feel special. It's really not. So like my answer is that it's neat, but like it's not mind blowing or anything like that. It's when you're able to pull an idea out of your head and make it in a three-dimensional way or get it down on paper just how you see it in your head. That's where it feels like an out of body experience. Like I just did that. That's really cool. I'm not so interested in the fame getting parts of it in terms of like having a celebrity wear something or having a big sale doesn't really interest me that much. It's the doing that I love.
You mentioned that once you go through the creative process and then you've completed a piece, it sort of loses your interest at that particular point. But
Yeah.
was there any piece that kind of followed you or maybe even haunted you through your years, or one that you continue to kind of reference or think back to? And what made that one different than the others?
I guess the referencing one, I mean, all of them. Again, I'm sure everybody says this, all of them I love. The one I have revisited a couple of times is I made a koi pond a few years ago. Um, and it was something I actually used to do as a child in our garden. I would dig ponds, and I remember with my dad, we made like a gazebo once, and I dug a huge moat around it in a pond and made a rock pond and put fish in it. So anyway, I'm interested in these, and they were really, really, really fun times. I made a koi pond, so it was like a it's actually a huge 17 carat slab of aquamarine that I did a painting of a koi behind, and then made like a very simple garden thing. And when I had finished that, I wanted to revisit the pond again. So like I revisited the pond in winter, and I made like a snowed over pond with like, rather than using an aquamarine, I used a quite heavily included piece of rock crystal so that the water looked like it was frozen and had this breath in it. And rather than using a piece of mother of pearl, white mother of pearl to do the miniature painting on, I used a piece of like Tahitian black mother of pearl. So everything was kind of darker and moodier. And I carved up some coachalong like snow mounds and then the pave. Anyway, I revisited it during wintertime, and I'm just a partial way through now revisiting the pond in autumn. So like for this one, I've used a smoky quartz that I cut so that when you look through and see the miniature painting, it looks like you're looking through brackish, sort of tea-stained water, and there's going to be a whole bunch of fallen leaves that I'm cutting out of like sunstone and tiger's eye and different. It's just going to be very colorful. They kind of each have a similar form that they're surrounded by a cobblestone edge of natural diamonds, but at the same time, they're also very different so that you can see that they are different journeys. That's the only time I've really revisited an idea over and over again. And that's because of the memories of like making the koi ponds as a child with my, well, digging the koi ponds I did myself, but like as family memories, I love revisiting and doing those.
Yeah, I love how the inspiration from a childhood creative moment can then re-inspire you in adulthood and look different with a
Oh,
different skill
constantly.
set.
100%. Yeah, no, everything I do comes from like childhood memories and feeling warm and safe. And yeah, there's this other idea that's really fun, which I've done some practice with, but I haven't quite gotten to actually doing it yet. But when I was a kid, to make extra money, I had a paper run, and I also used to collect aluminium cans. Sorry, said the Kiwi way, aluminium cans to make a little bit of money. I'd take them in for recycling, and to so I could fit more cans in my backpack, like I would squash them. And then one day, like when I got to the recycling plant, they would just weigh the cans and give me money for the cans. It wasn't per can, it was per weight. And one day when I was squashing the cans, I figured out I could put some rocks in these cans, squash them. They're not going to rattle because I've squashed the cans so much. And then when they weigh the cans, like I'm going to get more money because it's full of rocks, which was quite smart of me, I think. It must have really messed up their refining and smelting of the aluminium. So anyway, like it made me smile thinking about how cheeky I was as a kid. It made you smile now. So like I'm making this. I'm in the process of making this piece where I've got like a precious piece of metal with quite a large precious stone in it, and I'm going to cover it in aluminium thin enough that when you crush it, you can see like the thinly laid facets of the precious stone underneath. And from the back, you can see the stone. But it's like this aluminium wrapping a stone reminds me of like crushing the aluminium around the pebbles as a kid. So it's just like this memory. I'm doing the same thing that I did when I was like 8 years old, now as an adult. And so, yeah, everything's about like little memories and things that make me smile and being able to express that and what I'm doing now with the skills and thing that talent, I guess, that I have now.
Yeah, well, I think it shows in your work that you're willing to break the rules.
Yeah. Well, are there rules though? Who says there are rules?
I think there are understood popular ways. I think there's tradition.
Yeah, tradition for sure. Um, Yeah, I'm
Really
just
fun.
being me. I think we all need to be ourselves and just being me. Which again, when I was younger, I wouldn't have had the confidence to do that sort of thing, or I guess I was more reliant on getting the next job when I was younger. I was more thinking about the end client. Nowadays, as I said, with 30 years of making, I'm kind of in the position where I can think more about what makes me happy more than an end client. And yeah, it's all about making me happy and telling my story, and then the collectors will find it later on rather than thinking about how can I get a client. It's like I'm just making.
You almost answered my next question right out the
Hmm.
gate. My next question was going to be, very often jewelry is very personal for both the maker and the wearer. The wearer
Yeah.
develops a relationship to it. And I was gonna ask, like, what is your ethos behind each piece that you approach? You talk about how, for an auction house or a museum or a client, your approach is the same. And how would you kind of describe your
Yeah, it is the
ethos?
same now. Again, that's now. That's like 30 years down the road. It would have been very different if you had have asked me when I was only 6 months into my journey. It was all about like trying to do something that's going to get like a little bit of attention or going to get a client or probably more likely going to get a sale. But yeah, for me, it's all about just telling my story. And again, it doesn't matter which medium that's in, whether it's jewelry or something else. It's all just about filling the piece up with so much love and joy and so much of me into the work that like it's recorded in this physical thing now, so that there's like a little piece of me out there. That's my ethos. Actually, my honest ethos is and this has been the same actually since I was very, very young. Whenever I do something, I do it with the mindset that if in 100 years' time, whatever it is ended up on Antiques Roadshow, like I want to have the piece be able to give the expert a really good story to tell. Like when if in 100 years' time anybody cares about anything I do and it was to find its way on Antiques Roadshow, like I want that expert to have to like talk for like 15 minutes about how special the piece is because of XYZ. So like I just pack as much specialness into a piece as I can for
Oh,
that
I
reason.
love that. I love that so much. You always want
Yeah.
your pieces to outlive you, and the story that goes into it you have developed as a storyteller. You described your season as kind of being a scrappy young jeweler and willing to work and do whatever it takes, but now
Yeah.
you're kind of in this refined space where you're telling a different story. You're telling your story.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. And I think that becomes more important and even more so for like younger people nowadays with the advent of like CAD and 3D printing and even with like AI possibly doing CADs and the CAD designs in the future. Like there's just such an abundance of everything out there at the moment, and it's getting easier and easier for people to do things with less and less effort. So like the world really is drowning in like consumer products and different things like that. So it becomes more and more important to, if you want to not just be like everybody else, if you want to stand out and do something different, the only way you can do that is by confidently being yourself and by putting your own voice out there. Like you are the only you in this entire world. So, like, share it. You're going to find an audience just by being you because you are so unique. Share your pain, share your hurt, share your frustrations, share your love, share the things that you find beautiful, and like it'll resonate with people.
That's beautiful. And your artistic background is so nuanced in the way that you have now, implemented that into your pieces. And you have also, which we kind of touched on, but not so much yet, you're also a
Hmm.
phenomenal gouache artist, which for those who don't know is a form of painting. And so do you paint every single piece before you make it?
No, no, I don't. Again, because the design is already very vivid there in my brain, and because I'm not outsourcing the creation to anybody, I don't actually really need the design painting there because I can reference it in my head anytime I want to, a lot easier than like getting up and going over to my design bench. So no, I don't need to, so therefore I don't do it. I tend to do it occasionally because I love the tradition of it. I love that traditionally that was the way things were done. So, like, if it's not tearing me up to get to the bench and start creating straight away, then I'll sit down and do a painting. I do paint things often that I know I'll never make. just because I love the process of painting. I find it so much easier. Like I can get a painting done in a day, whereas making something might take me like 6 months. So like being able to finish something in a day can be quite refreshing sometimes. So like that's when I'll sit down and I'll paint something just for fun. So yeah, sorry. The answer is no. I don't paint all the time beforehand, but most of the time I will.
It's an art form in itself. The challenge of, hey, it exists in this painting form, and you maybe feel the freedom to like go a little bit more wild in the painting.
Yeah, yeah. You know, the great thing about painting is like I've obviously made quite a few things in my life, jewelry pieces. I don't have a single one of them. They're all out there in the world. I've got every single painting I've ever done in my own life. Like I've got something tangible that I can look at and say like I've done something with my life. Otherwise, if I didn't have like the paintings, like I'd be sitting here with nothing to show for like what I've spent my whole life doing. So I quite like that the paintings, often I'll have like collectors ask, can they have the original painting too? And it's like, no. This is like I have to be selfish here. This is mine. I keep them archived in albums. I've got every single one I've ever done in my entire life. Like it's kind of nice to have something for me.
I can't
That's
wait for
quite
the
cool.
day when you scan them and publish them in a book.
Yeah, that might be fun. That might be something for somebody to take care of once I'm no longer here, maybe. I also, interestingly, in that I keep a very detailed daily workshop journal, which is probably one of my most prized possessions. I've been doing it since 2017. At the end of every day, I'll sit down with my workshop journal, and it's almost like a little diary entry where I'll write what I've done in that particular day. I work on one piece at a time. I'll write down exactly what I did, and I'll maybe do a little bit of sketch if a sketch can explain better than my words can in written form. And then I'll put a line in how many hours in that day I've spent on that piece. And then the next day I do the same thing and the same thing. So by the time that one of my pieces is finished, there's like a recording of every single hour, how every single process was. So that might be something interesting for people to have a look at in the future too,
I
along with
love
the
that.
renderings.
You're meticulously organized, which also probably allows you to understand what it takes to make your pieces. Sometimes I think, and I'm guilty of this, I get lost and in the moment of working and I forget to track how many hours I've put into
Mm.
something. And that has sort of, you built a routine for yourself so that you actually can tangibly understand exactly what something took.
Yeah, yeah. You should totally keep a workshop journal because I wish I had have started it sooner than 2017. I would have loved to have had it from the very first piece I made. It's just great. And again, there are a lot of people hand making things, but it is becoming rarer and rarer. So to like to have a recording of it, like imagine if we could go back and see a workshop journal from somebody in Lalik's workshop on how, I mean, I'm sure there was more than one hand touching those pieces in the creation, but like imagine if one person created it, to sit down and see like how that evolved is like it's it's really magical. So like I would recommend it to you and to anybody to like keep a workshop journal. And it's practical too. Like I know I'll when I'm making something, I'll keep a record of like the autumn koi pond, for example. I've got the main body of it made. I'll record how much it weighs. Then I'll drill it and cut the jaws and then I'll weigh it there. I'll get a recording of like how much weight is lost during azuring and drilling, so that I know like 70% of the weight was lost. So that means I can make this large sculptural earring and be confident that it's going to be light enough to wear without it, like pulling down the woman's ear or something like that. And other times I'll have a flat piece of metal I've cut out, and in my book, I'll trace around it, and then I'll dome it up into the shape that I want, and then I'll trace around it again on the same page. So I know how much the metal shrinks and how much volume I need and the next one. It just becomes this great reference for you. And like, I know that I need to make things in a certain wall thickness for a certain stone because I did it this one time before, and I know that I can go down to as thin as like 1.2 millimeter wall thickness on a really nice high dome and still have enough thickness to set like 3 millimeter rounds or something like that. It's just a really valuable reference in your own word that you can understand.
I love it. I'm so inspired right
I'll
now.
show you I'll show you afterwards. It's funny
Yeah,
because I
well,
went
yeah,
to
I want
talk
to
at
know exactly what brand of journal you're using, and then I want someone to dedicate the time to taking all of your journals and all of your gouache paintings and scanning them
you have
and
to hit up
sell
some
it.
book publishers. Funnily enough, I went to talk in London at the can't remember if it was the Goldsmiths Guild or the no, it was the British Academy of Jewelry, and I took my workshop journals across to show them, and now everybody that goes through the British Academy of Jewelry, they all have to keep a workshop journal as part of their coursework, which is really pretty neat to think about. That there's going to be a whole bunch of, I mean, even if only half of them survive, like a whole bunch of journals out there for future people to look at before the robots take over to see like what humans used to be capable of. It's pretty cool.
All right, so that concludes part one of Michael Robinson on the podcast. We continued, we just had such a good conversation. I didn't have it in me to cut it down to a single episode. He just has so much rich content. So be on the lookout for part number two coming out next week. And actually, as Michael and I were continuing to talk, and even off camera, I discovered that he and my brother live in the same city, and I had actually pre-existingly scheduled a trip to go out and visit my brother. So when the second part of this two-part series is actually airing, and the day it comes out, Michael invited me to come in person and visit and tour his studio. So that's going to be such a treat. He has given me permission to film while I'm there. So be on the lookout for Pass the Torch Jewelers on Instagram, because I'll be sharing the content there. But yeah, so thank you so much for joining in. Please like, review, leave a comment, whatever you can do. It helps keep this project going, and I see everything. So thank you so much, and I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day. Cheers.